All right, it's time to go ahead and dive into a juicy topic for you, the Pilates instructor, in which we are going to be discussing 5 tips for reformer programming. Okay, this is all meant to just be good advice. None of these are rules or regulations. So, just like anything else here at Evidence-Based Pilates, take what you like, leave what you don't. Now, we have 5 things to discuss. And the first thing that I want to mention in regards to just tips for programming is to remember that you don't get paid to program. Unless you're in a very fortunate situation. Maybe I shouldn't assume, but like 99% of Pilates instructors don't get any pay for their time programming. Now, this isn't to devalue the programming process, but it is to show you the value of doing it faster. If you spend weekends programming your classes, I love to see and hear how much Pilates instructors really care about their practice, and that you take your weekend to go ahead and program. However, I would also like to suggest that there's a more time efficient way to do so, because the more time that you take to program, the lower your hourly rate is. If you spend 10 hours a week programming, and let's say you made I'm just going to do easy numbers, okay? Let's say you worked for 30 hours. Okay, you worked for 30 hours and then you made $1,000. Okay, you might be like, I make way more than that or less than that. This is just easy numbers, okay? So let's say 30 hours made $1,000. But now, okay, that's like $30 an hour. Now, if you program for 10 hours, you actually worked for 40 hours and you made the same amount of money. Now, those may be inflated numbers or not accurate and all the things. It's just the point, okay? The less time that you take programming, the more you make per hour, because you get paid diddly squat to program, okay? So as time goes on, I would recommend that if you take more than 5 minutes to program a class, it's way too much time. Way too much, meaning not that you're not good enough or anything like that. I've taken more time to program a class, but what I mean is that you can accelerate the programming process. So, I mean, in the link in the show notes, like, no pressure or anything. If you're just like wanting to program faster, there's a link to my Mastering Mat and Reformer Programming course. It teaches you a framework, and then I also provide you a programming system. It's a system of sheets that shows you how to program classes in less than 5 minutes. In there, I actually program. Like what it really does, it shows you how to program like 5 classes at the same time. There's a 30-day money back guarantee, so you can just try it. If you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. It's no problem. I just want to help Pilates instructors. No pressure, too. Okay, we're here to talk about it. So you don't get paid to program is the first thing. So I would recommend valuing like learning strategies, or if you want that programming system that takes your programming costs down. Okay, you get your weekends back, right? Or like you don't have to worry about spending your lunch break programming and all the things. There are more time efficient ways to do so. The second tip that I would recommend is to dismiss programming rules. Now, I'll explain a little bit of what that means, because that can mean very different things to different people, right? The first one that I'd mention is if you learned a certain way of programming in your Pilates course, that can be really valuable when you're learning to program, right? Like for me as a physical therapist, it's really helpful to have a flow of a treatment plan or a treatment session when I've never done one before, right? Like in physical therapy school, we get a whole layout. Really, really helpful. Same thing with Pilates school, right? You get a whole layout, or hopefully you got a layout of like how to program a class. Now, a lot of times there are rules that are more flexible in some programs, very rigid in others. All depends, but none of them are the holy grail. right? They're just like templates that are useful if you don't know what to do, right? Because the problem is you don't know what to do and then they tell you what to do. If we double click on that, there's a massive problem if there's a suggestion that like that's the best way to program a Pilates class or that's the best way to program movement, because that would just be completely made up, and it's probably made up by the person who created the rule, right? So the idea is like my rule's the best, right? Well, yeah, of course it is to you. Now, outside of that, right? Nothing personal. One thing that I would mention within this is like you don't need to start class by bending the spine in one particular way. Like there are some programming advices where it's like you have to flex the spine before you extend the spine, or like extending the spine is last because you have to be warmed up for it. You can just warm your class up with the cat stretch. And you can extend first, or you can flex first, or you can side bend first, or you can even rotate first, right? Start with thread the needle. But it makes sense to start like smaller range of motion, slower, less load, because you're warming up. But when you're warming the body up, there isn't like the best warm up or the best framework for a warm up in terms of direction, meaning direction of bending the spine. Because I know there's a huge emphasis on bending the spine, and rightfully so, in Pilates. Okay, there's no like correct way to do it. It's nice to bend them in all directions, like warm the body up and all of the things. But one thing that I would also mention is that there's also no correct order in terms of like emphasis. Also, sometimes there's frameworks where it's like you need to do like gentle stretching, and then you have to like there's usually big words to make it sound better. It's like full body integration, right? Because like anytime you see integration, it's like this is all of a sudden more important, right? And so it's like full body integration or upper body, pressing, and then upper body pulling, and then lower, like that's fine. It's a good framework, right? But you could also do none of that and get the same result. So there's no correct emphasis in terms of like how we bend the spine or like how we load the body in terms of order, and all the things. And if you don't, another aspect of that is like it's still a Pilates class in my book, right? And I'm not the Pilates police. I'm just an advocate for movement variability and just movement for as many people as possible. I think all movement is good movement, and the medicine and the poisons and the dose. And so even if you don't bend the spine in all directions, it's still a sufficient Pilates class, right? Like if you didn't do rotation, like intentional rotation, like trunk rotation, right? Pelvis is fixed and you twist from the upper body. It's still a Pilates class, right? There's still so many things that you did do. Now, in a like quote unquote ideal class, do you bend the spine in all directions? Sure, it totally makes sense. It's more human variability. But I feel like we can also make the same case for all joints. And like second on my list would be like shoulders and hips, right? And so like that meaning like bend those are ball and socket joints. So it's like rotate the hip and load it also in all directions, flexion, extension, abduction, internal, external rotation, and same thing with the shoulder. So I think we put like an over, so the spine is awesome, but we also want to consider how we're loading the hips and also loading the shoulders. Or you could just get more general with that and say how you're loading the legs and how you're loading the arms, which we'll talk about at the end of this little chat that we're having. But so programming rules, I think it's more or less like programming guidance. And so if there's been like a rigid thing that you've been taught, just allow it to be a little softer, right? It's not wrong, right? But sometimes like it's like the things we learn are taught as like laws or like superior, and they're not wrong in terms of what they're doing. It's just they're a lot of times they're no better than like an other alternative. There's like 100 other alternatives that are equally as good. Okay. So in regards to programming rules, there's many ways to win here. There's many ways to win here. We don't have to bend the spine in all directions, although like do it, right? I think we should. Okay. But we also want to consider like the extremities as well. There's no correct order in terms of what you need to bend first. There's also no correct way to do emphasis on the body. It also like there's also this programming rule that like we have to do a full body program the whole time. Like every class has to be a full body program, which we'll get more detailed in this conversation. But I would say no on that. And then people would be like, oh, it's not Pilates, but that's fine. Like I'm just going to expand what like Pilates means. And just a side note, as I've grown, and it doesn't mean that you have to, but as I've grown in my career, my definition of what Pilates is allowed to be has expanded. And that's not based on disrespect to Joseph Pilates or any people that came thereafter. It's just an emphasis on client care, in that I'm like, what's the priority is how can I provide the best movement, like the best movement experience that's available to the clients. And so I don't even think about like, is this like considered Pilates or not? I just teach good movement, or what I would think of as good movement, to the clients. And so I would just suggest that it's okay if it's actually not a full body thing, because if you're working with somebody who's having a total knee replacement, why does it have to be full body? Sure, it can be, but what if you focus on lower extremities, right? Or you're doing an older populations class, and why not strengthen the legs today and work on balance? Meaning that it's okay if you don't stimulate every part of the body. And sometimes what happens, and this is an argument, like a counter argument for what's called a split body routine. Um, Split body routines are just as effective as full body routines. It's about volume, which is the amount of sets you do per week. But I won't go down that rabbit hole. Sometimes what happens in full body classes is you don't get enough stimulation in any body part to actually get that particular body part significantly stronger. Whereas if you just did more reps on like the legs, then we have enough to get the legs stronger. So sometimes it can be useful to emphasize the legs in like some of our programming, and just like not really do a lot of arms today, because we're just going to get the legs stronger, and we'll bend and do all the things, but like there's just a heavy emphasis on legs today. That's okay. And I'm not saying you have to do that, but I would question the narrative that says, oh, in Pilates, we work the whole body, right? We don't just do part of the body. Because a lot of times that programming like dialogue, it's a fallacy. It's a self-fulfilling fallacy, or prophecy, I guess we would say, that suggests that what we're doing is better because we're doing the full body, not just part of it. But that's only true if you don't understand load. So you could also say, from a more sophisticated point of view, that you haven't provided enough stimulus to any part of the body for any of it to get stronger. It's all healthy, but if you split it up, someone's coming multiple times a week and you went heavy on legs and heavy on arms, right? Then you might be providing enough stimulus to the legs on one day and then the arms on one day to get stronger. It's just another strategy. So I would just consider it as like zooming out and having more options for programming. It's totally fine if you have like a leg focus class or an arms focus class or a full body class. I have all of them in the Pilates club. You can get a free trial, by the way, and any links linked to this video if you are watching on YouTube, or if you are watching or listening on a podcast, links are below. So that's 2-week free trial. You can just come hang out with me in the Pilates Club. There's hundreds of classes. We have a full virtual studio, so I do classes daily. Not that you have to hang out with me every day, but it's available, Matt and Reformer. And then the classes, we have Matt Reformer. At the time of this recording, we have Cadillac and Wonder Chair. And then that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There's over 16 workshops. You get to come to a live one every month with me. So you get to learn from a physical therapist and Pilates instructor. I give you all my programs. So if you just want like hundreds of programs, so you can just have them. You can download them and change them. If you don't like some of them, just change it. Anyways, that's Pilates Club. You can DM me if you have more questions. With that said, the last 3 bits of this are going to be more practical advice in terms of like what to do. The previous was just kind of like a framework, right? Of like, let's not take so much time to program. I mean, you can, right? If you're like, no, I love it. It's like, it fulfills you to program for hours. Do it. Don't listen to me. I'm speaking from a bias of productivity, and not productivity like ill productivity as in like your time is valuable, so increase the value of it from a monetary point of view. And then you also have, because you spend less time programming, you have more time to like do other things that you like. But that's not for everybody. And then the second one was dismiss programming rules, which just means expand what correct programming could be, right? There's many ways to win here. Now, in terms of programming, if you're like, all right, but what do I actually do? I think a way to simplify things, and for anyone who knows me, I'm a huge fan of simplicity. It's like, what's the simplest and easiest thing that we can do that provides excellent results, right? The standard is excellence, and then what's the easiest, most like simplest thing we can do to achieve that? And so for programming, full disclosure, I program my online classes. I used to just programming in my head, but now I use a whiteboard when I'm on camera. It takes me one song to program, because I listen to like old school music, like stuff I grew up with, and I just write. I'm done. I refuse to take longer than that. And the way that I program it is in body orientation to the reformer. Okay, it's not about emphasis. Like, it's not like, oh, legs and arms and back. Like, I consider that, but that's not the framework at all. The framework is body orientation. And here's an example. I have notes. Like, I'm looking behind the camera for a little bit, but I have no notes on like the specifics of this. So a class can just be like, a framework would be, let's say you start next to the reformer. You do like some kind of lunging stretch, like Eve's lunge, single thigh stretch. I'm speaking reformer, by the way. And so you start there, right? You're next to the reformer. Then you stand and you're facing the foot bar. You do elephants or something. You do whatever exercises. Then you do your single thigh stretch on the other side, right? We'll call that a warm up. That's like 5 to 10 minutes. Then you have all kinds of options, right? You can go, like, one class could be that you are kneeling facing the side. You do stuff. Then you are planking facing the back of the reformer, so you're off your knees. Then you're kneeling facing the second side. Then you go ahead and you lie supine, so you're on your back. Then you lay on your right side, right? So now we're lying down facing the side. That's an orientation. Then you're lying on your back. You're doing stuff again. Then you lie down on your left side, and you're doing like side lying stuff. Okay. And then you will likely be out of time. If not, go do a short box setting. Right? Short box is awesome for like end of class, because you don't have to put the box back. You only have to go get it. So that's just like an example, okay, of like, that's the framework. You're standing next to the reformer, supine, standing next to the reformer, second side. You're kneeling facing the side, then you're planking, then like facing whichever way, then you're kneeling. You're laying supine, laying on your side, on your back, laying on the other side, grab the box. That's the framework, okay? Now, that could be like overwhelming, right? I've been doing this for 15 years, okay? There's an aspect of like just learning through repetition. And so that would be one example of a framework. I won't bore you with other ones, right? Because you could be like, oh, I'm lying supine, then I'm standing next to the reformer, then I'm facing the back. It's just like, there's just different orientations. You can probably orient yourself like anywhere between like 6 to 8, maybe 9 times in a class. And when I say orientation, it's how your body is oriented to the reformer. Like, kneeling facing the side is an orientation. You're on your knees and you're facing the side of the reformer. Right? You probably have a strap and you're doing stuff probably with your hands, right? And then like facing the foot bar, right? Standing would be an orientation. That's what I'm talking about. So I would consider like frameworks like that. And I only have like 3 or 4 that I really use in terms of like where I'm starting. I guess I should say that in terms of where I'm starting, right? And I either start my class standing next to the reformer, like Eve's lunge. Anyone in the Pilates club can advocate for this. They're like, yes, all the time. Or we like stand on the reformer to start, like think elephant, or we're lying on our back, like footwork. That's usually like where we start, and then we go from there. In my program at like 3-ish minutes, we're done, and I don't know, people keep showing up and signing up, so I think they're all right. But what you need in that framework is an understanding of what to do, right? So it's like, all right, I'm kneeling and I'm facing the side of the reformer. What do I do now? What are my spring settings, right? It's, things like that. So spring settings, there's a little bit of memorization, right? Just like anatomy, there's a little bit of memorization. But if you actually learn how to learn anatomy rather than understand it, there's a lot less memorization. but that's another podcast episode. Um, with that said, understanding spring settings, that's the memorization part. Like you should just like know in your head when you're kneeling, you're facing the side of the reformer and you have a strap in your hand, you're not going to have 4 springs on. There's like no exercise. I mean, there might be one. I don't know it. There's like almost no exercises where you'll have 4 springs on. So that's where it's like, you learn that stuff in your course. You have a half spring or a full spring, usually, right? And then you're doing stuff. So with those assumptions where we kind of sort of know spring settings, because that's the memorization part, we just want to know what I would call combos, right? At Breathe Education, we used to call them clusters. Someone else may call them groupings, like whatever it is. It's just like it's a combination of exercises that fit well together. Like a classic one, if you're laying supine, if you're unfamiliar, supine means on your back, like flat on your back on the reformer. Right. So you're doing footwork, Pilates V, arches, heels, right? Sound familiar? Then you can do like lower lift and running, right? There's this like classic footwork. Then you can do bottom lift where you bring your heels on the corners of the bar and you lift your bum up, you press out in it, right? So it's like a floating footwork. Then you change the springs. You can do hands and straps. Does this sound familiar? Hands and straps, feet and straps, bridging, right? That's just like classic, right? You're going to be like 15 minutes in the class already, if not more, okay, depending on how far you go with that reps and all the things. So that would be a combo, right? That's one combo you can do on your back. But if you just have like combos in your back pocket that you're really familiar with, like go-to combos, and you have it in every orientation, your programming is going to be like nothing. Okay, like if you're standing on the floor and you have one spring on, like let's see, that's pretty standard. What do we do? It's like, what combo can you do? I can rail off like 5 in my head, but I've been doing it a while, right? And that's where you bring your programming down. You got to understand combos in each orientation, and that's why, like in the mastering mat and reformer programming course, the sheets are all based on combos and orientation. So I actually give them to you. I give you over 100 programs that are already done, and so you just pick combos, and there's like 15 per orientation, and then you just like copy and paste them in. In the Pilates Club, I also have combos available to you if you just kind of want inspiration. But aside from that, I just want to help. And that, like, this is the framework that works for me. It might not work for you. Maybe you have to have something written. It has to be in your handwriting. You need pictures. Like do it, right? We all like different things, and we're also at different levels of learning. But you don't have to be there where you can look at orientation and combos and get it. But I would encourage you to go in that direction, right? And then I can nearly guarantee that that'll just knock your programming down a ton if you go into that framework. And I can absolutely guarantee, it's a capital guarantee, with the programming system in the Mastering Mat and Reformer programming course, that will knock your programming down. I say 5 minutes because it's more catchy, like, program in less than 5 minutes, but you actually program like 4 classes in like 5 minutes. Like it's down to like ridiculously low. But anyways, so the practical advice so far is like think of like your orientation to the reformer, and then understand like combos in each orientation. And I'm going to give you a bonus one also within that, because we also need to consider like what body part is tired in terms of like within your combos, right? If you just did classic one is like a bunch of supine open chain stuff, which means you're on your back and like your legs aren't touching anything. Your hip flexors are working, even if you don't like them. They're working to have your legs in tabletop because they're maintaining hip flexion. So you need to like have your feet touching either the straps or the foot bar afterwards. You need to pair that with something that lets the hip flexors relax. So, or if your arms are super tired, do some, like the next exercise should be your legs. So I wouldn't overthink it as like, I need to hit all these body parts in class. That'll drive you freaking crazy, right? And also add little to no additional benefit to then just general exercise. But I would just consider, like, if a body part is tired, work another body part, right? If a body part is tired, work another body part. #science. Okay, that's anyways, just wanted to mention that. But the last thing that I'm going to provide you with here in terms of programming advice is just, if you are like, I want a full body program every class, here's the 5 things you need. You need to push, that's arms, right? Like pushing arms forward, let's say. You need to pull stuff, that's arms again. So you're pulling stuff closer to your torso. Then you need to have some kind of a squat, like footwork or a squat. You need some kind of a hinge. A hinge could be like a bridge. It can be a hip hinge. It can be a tippy bird, a Nordic hamstring curl, whatever it is. Nordic hamstring curls are kind of aggressive. I just tossed that in there. So some kind of a hinge. And then bend. When I say bend, I mean bending the spine. We do such a good job. We bend the spine in all directions in many Pilates classes. But it's still a Pilates class if you don't. So to reframe that, that's push, pull, squat, hinge, bend. Now, why? Well, to work the full body, we would work the front of the body and the back of the body. And then if we double click on that, we're going to work the extremities, right? If we talk about the extremities, means your arms and your legs. So if you're talking about the arms, you're going to want to push stuff and pull stuff. That's the most basic way. You can get more nuanced and be like biceps brachii, supination, shoulder flexion, elbow flexion. I get it. You can get very specific with muscles. That's its own thing. We're just talking about general exercise, which Pilates is general exercise, would be push and pull. Okay, you're going to push stuff in front of you, and you're going to get tired doing that, and you're going to pull stuff. Okay, pushing stuff would be like a push-up. Okay, or front rowing, right? You're sitting on the reformer, and you're facing the foot bar, and you're pushing the straps forward. Pulling would be like chest expansion, pulling straps, right? You're working the shoulder extensor group, where the arm is going that starts in front of you, and then you pull it towards your body or behind your body. That's going to work the front and the back. Again, you can get more nuance. Be like, what about my middle deltoid? You can do some shoulder abduction, but just simple stuff, push and pull. Okay, you're going to work the arms. Now, a lunge would be a type of a squat, because a squat, you bend your hips, your knees, and your ankles. Okay, so you go down and then you go up, and that's the same thing in a lunge. Okay, a lunge is just like a split stance. That's going to bias. It's not going to bias your hamstrings so much, which is why you put hinges in there, because the hamstrings, without getting too nerdy into their anatomy, when you do a squat, they shorten at your knee, but they lengthen at your hip. So they're more like it's closer to an isometric movement where they're not really changing length. Whereas your quadriceps, okay, outside of the rectus femoris, your quadriceps predominantly, they're working a lot, and then your glutes will also work depending on the depth of the squat. And there's other stuff going on with it, but it works your legs a ton. Then a hinge just means like you're like, I'm going to say hip hinge without getting more detailed, but I would just say some kind of hip hinge. I think a classic one would be your bridges on a reformer, or it could be a mat. As much as we say they're about the glutes, they're really about the hamstrings. There are studies to support that. So if you have to like squeeze your glutes to like tuck your pelvis and all that, that tells you that it's not a good glute exercise, because if you have to volunteer the glutes, the exercise didn't do it, your volitional contractions did it. But anyways, outside of that, you're going to work your hamstrings a ton, especially on the lighter spring, right? And what a hinge is that your knee stays relatively at the same angle, and you're moving at the hip. So that could be a deadlift in like the gym, right? Or just a hip hinge where you're standing and you bring your trunk forward and then you bring it upright, that you're hinging at your hips. A bridge is also a hip hinge. You're on your back, right? You start in some kind of hip flexion. You're on your back. Your knees are above your hips. Feet are on the foot bar. You push down. You bring your hips up. You're in less hip flexion, or maybe even hip neutral, right? And then you go down. You're hinging at your hips. So that's going to bias your hamstrings, okay? Because your hamstrings will change length in that exercise. And if you're on a really light spring, oh yeah, you're going to get a cramp. I hope you don't get a cramp, but you might. Then bend is just like, when I think of bend, right? We have push, pull, squat, hinge, and then bend. Bend is like do Pilates, right? all of it. Your favorite exercise, upstretch, do that, right? Do your mermaids, do all of the things. Okay. Now, programming doesn't have to be this complicated. You could just do Pilates, right? But if you wanted to like double click and make it a little bit more specific to definitely work the whole body, it's push, pull, squat, hinge, bend. Now, the way you manipulate this is that if you wanted to do an upper body class, you bend and you do a lot of pushing and a lot of pulling. So you're like push, pull, bend, push, pull, bend. Oh, tongue twister. Push, pull, bend. And then like maybe do some squatting stuff, right? Like totally fine. Get some legs in there. But like you'll just have more pushing and pulling stuff. And then the opposite, if you wanted to emphasize legs, it's going to be less pushing and pulling. It's going to be more about squatting and hinging. Okay. Programming doesn't have to be complicated. I think that my personal experience is when you're newer, when we're newer at a craft, in this case, Pilates, there's just less knowledge. So we tend to have more movement rules and we have more programming rules, right? We are very much seeking specifics. But then as you learn more about Pilates, but then way more about like movement and pain science and how people get stronger and things of that nature, we realize that it's really a lot of the benefits from the specific techniques are actually general benefits. And so we don't have to be as specific when we're working with a general population and teaching a Pilates class. But with that said, I hope that this was useful to help you become more skilled, knowledgeable, and confident with your programming. And if you want to learn more about becoming a science-based Pilates instructor, in which there's no big commitment, okay, totally flexible and affordable continuing education, and go ahead and get your free trial with the link in the show notes on a podcast or underneath this video on YouTube for the Pilates comprehensive continuing education resource made available to Pilates instructors. You get to learn from myself, Dr. Adam McAtee, for as much as you want. Not only do you get incredible content, a free trial to it, but you also get personalized mentorship from me. So you're always welcome to go ahead and join the community 100% for free for 2 weeks. But with that, I'll see you in the next episode.